So there you have a lot of background on Bitcoin. Let's get into this discussion now. And we're joined by some characters that you'll have seen before on this set. Arthur Goldstack, thank you very much for joining us. It's always a pleasure having you. And Mike, you've just been at the wall talking about labor and gaps in pay. Okay, Arthur, would you invest your bonus in Bitcoin?
If it was a very big bonus, I would take a very small part of it and invest it.
Okay.
Because it just seems like it's a great gamble to take. But you gamble with money that you can afford to lose. And that's the only basis on which you should go into Bitcoin.
Okay, so you'd be speculating on a startup share almost, that you don't know what might happen.
It's even less than that. A startup share, at least you can see the startup in action, and you can see what they're doing. Bitcoin, you have no idea what's going to happen and what's coming at Bitcoin or where it's going. The basis of Bitcoin was as an alternative currency. So you're going to spend it on things. But the way Bitcoin is evolving is purely as a speculative investment or venture.
All right. So, Mike, and I'm going to ask you the same question, but bearing in mind Bitcoin's up 500%, it has a market value now estimated at $110 billion US. Even investors on Wall Street can't ignore this anymore.
I think there are people that are going to take chances here, but let's put it in a very practical sense. If it's a currency, it should smooth my trade. It should make things easier for me to do. And at this moment in time, it takes time, but the big thing is it costs a lot. So for a small transaction, say for example, I want to go and buy groceries at the end of the month, and it's going to cost me 500 or 1,000 Rand. Bitcoin is going to cost that transaction 70 Rand or whatever. I've done some sums on it. And my debit card is going to charge me 2.50 Rand. So ultimately, it's just not worthwhile in that sense. The other thing is, we're picking up that it's using a heck of a lot of electricity. And the Bitcoin power that it needs for the transactions have a very long, transparent story with each transaction that gets put in. So the power increases all the time. And right now, the Bitcoin transactions use as much power as Ireland does. And that puts it into perspective.
All right, help me understand how it gets its value. Is there a finite amount of this and a lot of people chasing it? Because that's how we understand supply and demand. How does it get its value?
Well, people said there was a finite amount, but now some of this value is because it's not finite. So when they split the currency, they took Bitcoin and they made Bitcoin Cash. And therefore, everybody that had a Bitcoin all of a sudden had another currency. And people saw that that currency too had a value. So in the run-up in the last while, they thought there were going to be more currencies. So people put in their money thinking that they're all going to benefit from extra currencies. So actually, I think it's not fine, or I know it's not finite, because anything electronic can be doubled in this sense where nobody takes control over it. And there are very big fights within the Bitcoin community as to how they should move forward. Because right now, Bitcoin is a cubism process to transact with.
All right. Are we not just seeing a dot-com bubble drama playing out again?
It looks a lot like a bubble. And if you look at the shape of the graph of what a bubble typically looks like and the shape of the Bitcoin share price, then it looks very much, in fact, it's a mirror of the bubble graph. So one has to consider that it could be a bubble. But that doesn't necessarily prove that it's a bubble, because the reality is there is a Bitcoin economy out there. There's massive global investments going into it. There are central banks that are approving it or allowing it. And there are numerous traders now around the world, thousands of traders, accepting Bitcoin. None that I can find in South Africa yet, although if you speak to people individually, they'll trade in Bitcoin or sell or buy things in Bitcoin. But if you try to buy something online in Bitcoin, you can't. What you can invest in is motherboards and graphics processing units, which are in great short supply in South Africa because we have Bitcoin miners. You can generate Bitcoin by processing the algorithms behind the transactions. And over time, you can actually create Bitcoins out of that.
So there's a motherboard shortage at the moment.
And there's a massive motherboard shortage. And you speak to distributors like Mustec and Rectron, and they're struggling to supply their regular customers because everything they bring in is already ordered months in advance.
I'm trying to get to the reality of this thing, and I'm just sitting here thinking, you know, we're living in the fourth industrial revolution. Everything's gone digital, big data, and so on and so forth. Isn't this just another innovation in the long history of the different forms of money over time, and that we shouldn't be so worried?
I'd like to say this is maybe the start of what we're seeing as a new currency, but it's not going to be the sort of Bitcoin. If you go back into tech, for example, the first people that did software, the first people that were into the internet browser market, they've all gone. And if you look at the news markets and so on, that's all very, very different. And you know, you looked at things like Reuters Business Brief, which was a news program that you could get news on. Now, at the moment, that's all gone. So this is the same sort of history, I think, and we must remember that there's newer forms of cryptocurrencies already making a use of methods that use far less electricity and still have a huge amount of trust. But I think we've got quite a few steps to go, because I think there's a lot of crooks in the system at the moment, because a lot of cryptocurrencies are being launched. And at the moment, there's over 1,000 cryptocurrencies. There's more virtual currencies than there are real life currencies.
Something to bear in mind is that this isn't suddenly a digital currency that we haven't had before. Regular currency, rands, dollars, are actually digital currencies as well now. We don't actually see most of the money that we earn as salaries. It all goes into our bank accounts. It's invisible, it's in digital format. So in fact, all currencies are already digital, unless you have a currency that is in such deep trouble that no one will accept it in digital format. But we are transacting digitally. We conduct EFTs, we pay by credit card online, digitally. So currency is digital. So it's not meeting a particular need that
but there's
that
a central
exists.
banker somewhere along the line involved, whereas with Bitcoin there isn't. So we hear this word blockchain. What on earth is this? Help us.
Well, blockchain is the technology underlying Bitcoin, and what they describe it as is a distributed ledger, which means that any transaction in the chain is verified by every participant in the chain. Not that you can necessarily see who is conducting what transaction with whom, but you can verify that the transaction actually happened. And the problem with that from a currency point of view is that it makes it very cumbersome and slow. So you can only generate so many transactions per second, for example. So for what we saw in e-commerce this week with the double one day in China, where they generate $26 billion in revenue in one day, that couldn't have happened if they did it via blockchain or Bitcoin. But just to make one final point, that blockchain is a very powerful technology for validation and verification of transactions that are not necessarily financial, contracts and the like. So I think it's got a very strong future.
So look, we are moving fast in terms of technology. So this will become cheaper, this will become faster. If we get to that point, it will become a bona fide currency. But my fear, this anonymity, surely the authorities are going to be worried about money laundering. You can't FICA, you can't do anything with this.
Well, guess who's got the biggest Bitcoin store in the world probably is the FBI.
Wow.
Because of the amount of Bitcoins they've confiscated for that exact reason.
Right.
I think, you know, you're very right. What typically keeps a country together as well is, we don't always realize it, but it's their monetary system. So it's the interest rate that you get charged that the central bank likes to have a say in. And also, as you say, here in South Africa, it would be FICA, it might be called other things in other countries. And ultimately, that's one of the big concerns. And the other thing is that a lot of people are issuing sort of, let's call it, coin shares, and they're saying we're going to do something with this, and that's where your words, when you use the .com bubble, this is the Bitcoin bubble in a sense, and that might be a thing that breaks out as well.
All right, so bottom line, it is a speculative thing at the moment. It's not really behaving like a currency, and if you've got spare cash, go for it, knowing that you could lose.
Absolutely, 100% you're right.
It's a gamble, but it's a fascinating gamble, and the upside is massive.
Okay, so there you have it at home. If you've got hard-earned cash, please proceed with caution. You can't buy small bits of Bitcoin. It's a huge investment. So please have lots of money. You could make loads, but also you could lose loads at the same time. All right, that was Arthur Goldstack and Mike Schussler giving us the lowdown on Bitcoins and some